During World War II, every crumb counted. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was strategy. Nations fought to keep their armies and civilians fed under unimaginable shortages, and ingenuity often replaced abundance. Among the thousands of wartime innovations, one stood out for its quiet brilliance, a flour blend that could last a full decade without spoiling. It was designed to feed soldiers on the front, civilians under siege, and explorers venturing into the most hostile environments. Yet, over time, this incredible invention was buried under modern convenience and forgotten by history. Today, we're bringing it back to light. The story, science, and survival value of the forgotten flour mix that lasted 10 years. By 1941, supply chains were collapsing. Ships carrying grain were being sunk, and fresh produce was scarce. Armies couldn't rely on bread. It spoiled within days. Civilians had to ration and improvise, creating recipes that stretched ingredients far beyond their natural limits. Out of this necessity came a remarkable question. Could flour, the foundation of most foods, be preserved long-term without refrigeration or chemical preservatives? Food scientists in Britain, Germany and the United States raced to find a solution. They discovered that the main reason flour spoiled wasn't age, it was moisture and fat content. Traditional flour, especially whole wheat, contained oils in the germ that turned rancid over time. Remove those oils, and flour could, in theory, last indefinitely. In 1942, a group of military food chemists working under the United States Quartermaster Corps perfected a mix they called stabilized composite flour. It was a blend of wheat flour, dehydrated skim milk, soy powder and salt, baked lightly at low heat to drive out every trace of moisture before sealing it in wax-lined tins. The result? A shelf-stable, nutrient-rich flour that stayed fresh for 10 years, sometimes longer if kept dry and sealed. Soldiers used it to bake biscuits, thicken soups, and make emergency rations. Civilians learned about it through post-war survival guides. It was a true miracle of wartime necessity turned practical genius. This wasn't your typical flour. The 1942 mix underwent a controlled dehydration process that reduced its moisture content to below 5%. That's significant because at that level, bacteria, mold, and even insects can't survive. By blending wheat with soy and milk powder, scientists boosted both protein and fat stability. The soy acted as a natural emulsifier, while the milk powder added lactose and calcium, which helped retain flavour even after years in storage. To make it, factories would mill low-fat wheat, mix it with the powdered additives, then pass it through a drying drum heated just enough to remove internal moisture without cooking the starches. Once cooled, the flour was sealed in airtight containers, originally tin-lined drums, later replaced by wax-sealed paper sacks for home use. In tests, tins opened after 9 years showed no rancidity, no insect activity, and near original baking quality. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Civilians soon adopted smaller-scale methods. Many homemakers learned from wartime bulletins that they could mimic the effect by lightly toasting plain flour in an oven at low heat, around 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 90 degrees Celsius, for an hour, then sealing it in airtight glass jars with a bit of salt or powdered milk. This home version didn't last a full decade, but 5 years of safe storage wasn't uncommon. For anyone living through food rationing or post-war shortages, that was revolutionary. After the Second World War, large quantities of this stabilized flour were left in military stores. It found new life in disaster relief programs and expeditions. Mountaineers, Arctic researchers and sailors prized it for its resilience. It wouldn't mould, clump or lose taste, even in humid conditions. The 1953 British Everest expedition, for example, packed tins of the same formula to make high-altitude biscuits and porridge. By the late 1950s, the concept evolved into what we now call baking mixes and emergency meal bases. Pancake mix, instant biscuits and modern MRE bread all trace their lineage back to this Second World War innovation. Manufacturers kept refining the process, adding antioxidants like vitamin E or ascorbic acid to further prevent rancidity. Ironically, as food preservation became easier, the original method, the one that required no modern chemicals, faded into obscurity. But the principle remains sound and valuable today, especially for survivalists and homesteaders who want long-term food security without relying on industrial additives. While the exact military formula was classified for decades, the general method is, well, simple and safe to reproduce with today's ingredients. Start with low-fat, unbleached wheat flour. High-fat whole grain flour won't last as long. Spread it evenly on a baking tray and heat it gently at 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 90 degrees Celsius for about an hour to remove moisture. Let it cool completely. Mix in 1 part soy flour for every 5 parts wheat flour and add about 1 tablespoon of powdered skim milk per cup of flour. Finally, stir in a pinch of salt, which acts as both flavour enhancer and mild preservative. Once mixed, store the blend in airtight, moisture-proof containers, glass jars with rubber seals or vacuum-sealed mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Kept cool and dry, this modern version can last 5 to 10 years with little change in quality. For survival use, this kind of flour mix provides a steady energy source, balanced protein and essential minerals without refrigeration. If you're preparing for long-term expeditions, remote work, or, just want to be more self-reliant, this is one of the most practical lessons history can teach you. The genius of the 1942 formula wasn't just that it lasted a decade, it was that it relied on basic natural chemistry, remove moisture, stabilize fats, and seal against air. That principle still guides modern preservation from space food to survival rations. What's remarkable is that ordinary people back then used it without specialized tools, proving that resilience comes from knowledge, not technology. For today's history buffs and preppers, this forgotten flour mix is more than a curiosity. It's a working example of how wartime innovation can help us live smarter and more independently today. In a world increasingly dependent on supply chains and refrigeration, the idea of making a food staple last 10 years feels almost magical. But it's not magic, it's method, and it's one we can still learn from. If you enjoyed uncovering this forgotten piece of survival history, make sure you subscribe to In the Beginning for more deep dives into the practical genius of our ancestors. And if you know someone who'd appreciate rediscovering the lost recipes and inventions that shaped resilience in the toughest times, share this video with them. The past still has lessons that can feed the future, sometimes quite literally.